Division CRD in Fort Duval County, the state of Florida is now in session. The Honorable Russell Bealey presiding. May God save the people of the state of Florida and this honorable court. Please make sure your cell phones are turned off. You may be seated.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Apologize for a short delay in getting started, but we had some video feed issues and some audio feed issues, and we needed to make sure they were corrected for the media purposes. Also, I understand that some media members had asked that they could not see the juror button numbers, and I know that that might be difficult for them to see. So rather than strain, I will tell you there's an order that they are seated in. Juror number 1 is to my right and closest in the front row to the far end there near the bailiff, and it basically goes 1 through 8 and then 9 through 16. So that way, if the media needs to know, they can figure out the numbering system from there. Other than that, Mr. Guy, Ms. Corey, Ms. Wolfson, you ready to proceed?
We are.
Mr. Strolla?
So ready, Your Honor.
All right, then let's bring the jurors on in. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You can have a seat. Welcome back. Trust everything's gone well for you thus far, and your accommodations were all right. We're ready to resume with witness testimony, and so I'll turn it back over to Ms. Corey. Ms. Wolfson.
Yes, Your Honor. State Code Officer Holmes.
Officer Holmes, please. Good morning, officer. If you'll come here to the front for us, please. And right before the clerk, she'll have you raise your right hand and administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right, officer, if you'll come right over here and have a seat for us, please. All right, Ms. Wolfson.
Good morning, officer. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Robert Holmes, R-O-B-E-R-T-H-O-L-M-E-S.
And officer, where are you currently employed?
Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
April will be 7 years.
Are you assigned a particular identification number?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
65055.
Now, prior to becoming an officer of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, did you receive any sort of training?
Prior to, yes, ma'am, I was in the military.
Okay. Well, in between military and then joining Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, what sort of training did you have to become a police officer?
None. As far as the academy, none.
Did you go through the academy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you explain to the jury what the academy entails?
The police academy entails just going over the basics of self-defense, how to be a police officer, how to act and react, state laws, ordinances.
Okay. Did you also learn then about investigations and things of that nature?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, what is your current assignment within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Patrol.
Are you assigned to a particular zone?
Zone 3.
Could you explain to the jury where Zone 3 is?
Zone 3 is downtown, from downtown south pretty much to the St. Johns County border over to Beach Boulevard.
Excuse me for interrupting, Ms. Wolfson. I don't know if that microphone is on, and if it's not, it may have yet died again. Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, they're battery powered, and so sometimes they've been, all right, that one is working. So we have to change them out, I guess, to the IT people handle all that stuff. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Wilson, for turning that on.
Sure, Your Honor.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. Officer Holmes, what shift do you currently work?
Currently I work Watch 4.
And what hours is Watch 4?
Watch 4 currently is 13:30 or 1:30 till 12:55 at night.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, I'd like to take your attention back to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working that day?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And were you working that day as a patrol officer assigned to Zone 3?
ma'am.
To Zone 3?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that then here in Jacksonville,
Yes.
in Duval County?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, back on November 23rd of 2012, what shifts were you working?
At that time, I was working watch 5, which is 13:30 or 3:30 till 2:55 in the morning.
Okay, now back in November of 2012, also, did you work with a particular partner, another officer?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you call that person, I guess, your beat partner?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that at the time?
Dawn Valentine?
Now, Officer Holmes, back in November 2012, were you assigned a particular call sign?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
At the time, then it was Hotel 256.
And could you explain to the jury what a call sign is used for?
Call sign is assigned to each individual officer so we know, so other officers and dispatch knows who's on the radio and who needs assistance or who's getting a call.
So for example, instead of calling in and saying Officer Holmes and then your identification number, you would just say Hotel 256?
Correct.
Now, was there a reason for the hotel being used?
Hotel is a subsector of the zone. Each zone has its own subsector, actually 3 subsectors within that zone.
Okay, and what particular subsector then of Zone 3 were you working?
At that time, Hotel 2.
And could you tell the jury where exactly Hotel 2 is?
Hotel 2 is Bay Meadows Southside area.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, during the course of your shift back on November 23rd, 2012, did you respond to a call at the Gate gas station at the corner of Southside and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And could you tell the jury how it was that you ended up responding to that call?
We heard on the radio, Officer Fortuna put out a shots fired, which is a 3388. That's the call sign or the designation. And Officer myself and Officer Valentine responded to the Gate gas station.
Okay, now where were you and Officer Valentine when you heard this call come out?
We were just finished eating our meal break, and we were on Southside Boulevard.
And Officer Holmes, do you remember what time it was when you heard this call come out?
It was 7:39.
Is that PM?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer, could you also explain to the jury how it is that you hear these calls come out?
We heard it on the car radio. Everybody has, on Zone 3, we use a channel called Alpha 3. It's just for our zone, so everybody in the zone can hear what's going on with each other.
Okay. Now, once you heard this call, what did you and Officer Valentine do?
We made our way south on Southside Boulevard to the Gate gas station.
And can you explain to the jury what direction of travel you took in order to get to that Gate gas station?
Once we got on the gate, we had to do a U-turn at the Tinseltown area and proceed to south.
Okay, and Officer, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 3. Is that up on the screen in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer, can you, using this map, and you should be able to use your finger on it, can you show the jury the direction of travel you took in order to get to the Gate gas station? Now, Officer, what entrance, and you can use State's Exhibit 3 as well, can you explain to the jury how it was that you turned into the Gate gas station?
Yes, ma'am. At Old Bay Meadows Road, which is this intersection here, we made a left turn into the rear portion of the parking lot.
Okay, and was there a reason you entered in that particular entrance?
Yes. When Officer Fortuna put out a vehicle was fleeing the scene, a red Durango, was coming south at the back side of the Gate gas station. There's 2 back entrances, so this is the closest one to us.
Okay, and just to clarify, are you referring then to the entrance that you just put the red line on as one of the back entrances?
Yes, ma'am.
And then could you also explain to the jury where it is you are referring to the second back entrance?
Second one's right here.
Okay, and then, so those would be the 2 back entrances to the
Yes, ma'am.
gate, according to you?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then what would be the front entrance?
Front entrance will be right here.
Okay.
Officer, I need you to speak into that microphone a
Okay.
little bit closer, thank you.
Now, Officer Holmes, when you're responding to the scene, was Officer Valentine also responding to the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you all ride together, or do you have separate patrol cars?
Separate patrol cars.
And are those marked police cars?
Yes, ma'am.
When you responded to the scene, did you respond with lights and sirens on?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how long did it take you to get to the scene?
Approximately 5 minutes or so.
Now, Officer Holmes, when you pulled into that parking lot, to that back entrance where you made the red line, were you in front of Officer Valentine, or was she behind you?
I was in front of her.
And Officer Holmes, I'm now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. Can you show the jury the path you took then to get to the Gate gas station once you turned into that parking lot?
Yes, so once we pulled into Old Bay Meadows Road, which is down here, we drove On the outside of the parking lot.
When you pulled into that parking lot, did you see the red Durango at first, when you were down in that parking lot?
No, ma'am.
At some point, did you in fact see the red Durango?
Yes.
And now I'm showing you it's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 4. And could you tell the jury what State's Exhibit 4 is a picture of?
The red Durango.
And is that then the position it was in when you pulled into the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, prior to actually pulling into the Gate gas station, did you hear what is called a BOLO go out over the radio?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does BOLO stand for?
Be on the lookout.
What is the purpose of a BOLO?
It's where an officer puts out information over the radio so other officers in the area can be aware of an incident pertaining to a suspect, victim, missing person.
Now, officer, in this case, who actually put a BOLO out?
Officer Fortuna.
And what did you learn from that BOLO?
That the red Durango, at that point, the red Durango had returned, and the vehicle fleeing the scene at that time, the suspect vehicle he put out was a small four-door car, possibly black.
I don't know the objective characterization of the vehicle fleeing the scene.
All right, sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Sure. All right, the objection sustained. You can rephrase the question, Ms. Wolfson.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Bolo, Officer Holmes, based on this Bolo, did you learn then that the suspect vehicle was actually a dark-colored car?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 8. And as State's Exhibit 8, then just a close-up of the red Durango that you saw when you pulled into the parking lot. Is that
Yeah,
yes?
I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. I did.
Okay, Officer Holmes, when you pulled into the parking lot, can you explain to the jury where exactly you parked your car?
I parked on the passenger side rear. Do you want me to draw it?
Yes.
So I parked here.
And could you show the jury then where the front of your car would have been located?
Front of the car would have been here.
And that's that dot you just put on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Officer Holmes, when you parked your car, did you then get out of your car?
I did.
And where did you go once you got out of your car?
I walked along the driver's side of the vehicle, of the red Durango.
Now, officer, were you the only patrol car on scene at this point in time?
No, ma'am.
Who else was on scene to your knowledge?
Officer Fortuna was already there, but I did not know where the patrol car was.
Okay.
And Officer Valentine was right behind me.
And where did Officer Valentine park her car?
Probably behind me, about 20 feet away.
Now, Officer Holmes, do you remember when you pull up behind this red Durango, whether or not you saw any of the occupants out of the car?
Yes, ma'am.
Who did you see out of the red SUV?
I saw there were two young black males standing on the sidewalk in front of it.
And using State's Exhibit 8, can you just put 2 red X's where those individuals were standing?
That would be on the back side of the door on the sidewalk.
Up on the sidewalk
Yes,
between the
ma'am, yeah.
gate and the red Durango?
Yes.
Now, Officer Holmes, what did you do once you got out of your car?
I approached them to see if we had a victim.
Okay, and was that to see whether or not someone had in fact been shot?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on what they told you, Officer Holmes, what did you do?
They told me someone had been shot in the back of the Durango, so I made my way to the rear driver's side door.
Officer Holmes, I'm now showing you State's Exhibit 28. Is this a photograph of the rear back pass or driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am.
When you got to that door, were you the one who opened the door?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Could you tell the jury what you saw when you opened that back driver's side rear door?
I saw a young black male sitting on the driver's side rear passenger seat, sobbing uncontrollably. He was cradling another young black male's head, and the second black male was stretched out across the seat.
Now, was that person who was stretched across the street, was he later identified to you as Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
And Officer Holmes, can you in detail explain to the jury where exactly his body was positioned from what you could tell when you opened the door on this side?
He was sitting in the rear passenger seat, slumped over to the left. His right shoulder would have been on the other black male's right thigh. He was cradling him in his head almost as you would a baby.
Officer Holmes, what did you do when you first opened the door and saw this scene?
At that point, I was trying to see if all I saw was a young black male leaning over, so I didn't know if we had, one of the other gentlemen said had been shot, so I didn't know at what point or if he was even injured or not. The one that was still sitting up was sobbing uncontrollably. I was trying to ask him to calm down so I could check the pulse of the other one that was laying down.
Officer, were you able to check Jordan Davis's pulse from this angle?
No, ma'am, was not.
What did you do?
At that point, I made my way over to the rear passenger side door.
And officer, for the record, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 31. And is that in the rear passenger side door?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Were you then the one who opened this door?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you see when you opened this door?
I saw Jordan Davis slumped to the left-hand side of the vehicle.
And could you tell the jury the position of his body from this angle?
At this position, this point, he was leaning over, so instead of his butt being flat, it was up in the air, leaning to the left.
Officer Holmes, from this side of the car, from the rear passenger side door, did you also then try to check for a pulse?
I did, but he was stretched out too far for me to check.
Okay. What did you do then after opening the rear passenger side door?
I'd see if we had any, usually with a gunshot, you might have pooling blood, so I checked the seat area in front of his stomach, didn't see any pooling blood, lifted his, it'd be the right side of his shirt up an inch or so to see if we had anything. I didn't want to disturb any evidence or hurt him anymore if we did.
And did you see any evidence of blood at this point in time?
No, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, did you then go back to the rear driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you do once you got around to the other side of the car?
I asked the male who was sitting he was still sobbing uncontrollably, and I asked him to calm down so I could check for the pulse on his friend.
Were you able to check for a pulse at that point in time?
I was, yes. Once I got him to calm down, a couple seconds later, I was able to check.
And did you find a pulse?
No, ma'am, I did not.
At that point in time, did you then ask the young gentleman who was still sitting up in the car holding Jordan Davis, did you ask him to get out of the car?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And after he got out of the car, where did he go?
He wouldn't stand with Officer Valentine.
Now, where were the two young men when you first saw them up on the sidewalk? Where were they standing at this point?
Once we learned we had someone in the car, in the vehicle that was shot, I asked them to stand with Officer Valentine.
And going back to State's Exhibit 8, can you show the jury on State's Exhibit 8 where then you had all three of these young men stand with Officer Valentine?
It would be off the picture on the side, on this area over here, off the picture.
Once Officer Valentine, you had that other young man get out of the car, what did you do?
We pulled Jordan Davis from the back of the vehicle onto the concrete.
And did you have help in doing that?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who helped you do that?
Officer Valentine had a reserve officer with her at that point, and a citizen.
Now, Officer Holmes, can you explain to the jury, and let me go to, oops, State's Exhibit 21. Can you explain to the jury how the three of you pulled Jordan Davis out of the car?
Yes, ma'am, I was standing here. The reserve officer was inside the door here, inside the door jamb, and we pulled him this way, pulled him down and out.
And Officer Holmes, can you also on the screen show where you placed Jordan Davis when you got him out of the car?
His feet would have been here, his body out here, this way, with his head pointed this way.
And was he placed on his back?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
Once Jordan Davis was placed on the ground, what happened?
The citizen started performing CPR on him, and I checked to see if he had any obvious injuries.
Now, officer, when he started performing CPR, was he just doing chest compressions?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you notice as he was doing chest compressions?
I had Jordan's shirt lifted up a little bit on his right-hand side, up to probably about as right as his sternum area, and we can see blood coming out of his back.
And Officer Holmes, is that then the blood that's on the parking lot floor?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you, Officer Holmes, still working on Jordan Davis with the civilian when Jacksonville Fire and Rescue showed up on scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And once they arrived on scene then, did they take over for the care of Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do after emergency personnel arrived on scene?
At that point, I left Jordan's body there with the personnel and tried to find witnesses for the incident.
Now, can you explain to the jury, officer, what it means to secure a witness?
Anybody on scene present, we ask them if they see anything. If they had seen anything, we ask them to stand by, get their basic information. That way, if they do slip out for whatever reason or leave, we have their information to contact them. We ask them to stand by for further questioning.
Is part of securing a witness also then to ask them not to discuss anything about
Yes,
what
ma'am,
they
yeah.
saw
We
with
try and keep
anyone
them
else?
separate, and we tell them specifically do not talk with each other.
Now, in this particular case, did you yourself secure any witnesses?
Yes, ma'am, 2 of them.
And where were those witnesses when you secured them?
They were standing on the gate gas station, or in front of the gate gas station on the sidewalk. There's a long sidewalk out front of the door.
Oops,
They were
let me
standing
go
there.
back. I apologize. The State's Exhibit 4?
They
Can
were
you-
approximately here on the sidewalk.
Okay. And did you have conversations then with both of those witnesses, much like you just described to the jury?
Very brief ones, yes, ma'am.
Now, after securing these witnesses, did you have any other role at the scene?
I stood in front of the gate doors, the gate gas station doors, to make sure no one entered or left that was not authorized to be there.
And while you were standing at those doors, officer, was other law enforcement officers inside the store?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, Officer Holmes, were you asked by homicide to transport anyone down to the police memorial building?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And who were you asked to transport down to the police memorial building?
The other 3 occupants of the Durango.
Did you then place all 3 of them in the backseat of your patrol car?
Yes, ma'am.
And on your way down to the police memorial building, did they in any way discuss what had happened?
No, ma'am.
And what was their demeanor like, officer?
They were very shocked and in a state of disbelief. One of them kept saying, I can't believe this is happening. That was the only things that were said.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Strolla, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. I may have a moment to try and relax some, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Officer Holmes, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay. Thank you. Now, you said prior to law enforcement, you were in the Navy, correct?
Correct.
Did you receive any type of medical training or first responder training in the military?
You received very, very, very basic. I
but
mean,
you did-
nothing, CPR, everybody does CPR training, and other than that, it's just how to apply a tourniquet, and that's about all.
All right, so you did receive formal medical training in your military experience in the Navy?
I wouldn't call it formal, but yes, sir.
Well, you're not a medical doctor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And now, as a first responder, how long have you been a police officer?
April will be 7 years.
Okay. And in those 7 years, have you also been trained as a first responder and how to handle medical situations when you arrive on crime scenes, accidents, anything? Because you're on patrol, correct?
Correct.
That's part of your training.
Yes, I received CPR training in the academy and tourniquet training a few years after that.
Okay. And that was in-house with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you have continuing training in-house with the Sheriff's Office, correct?
It's for other portions of training, yes, sir.
Right. Now, you indicate when you came on scene, it took about 5 minutes to get there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true you actually came on scene prior to the bolo even going out by Fortuno. Isn't that true?
No, actually, I reviewed my catalogs, and the Bolo came out as we were arriving on scene. Otherwise, we wouldn't have pulled up to the red Durango with that being a suspect vehicle. That's not very good tactics.
Now, do you recall taking a deposition in this case on April 9th,
Yes.
2013?
Yes, I do.
Judge, and for the record, I'm referring to page 112, just the way I have it, Your Honor.
I do not have that deposition.
Judge, if we can approach, there are several officers that were put in one deposition by the court reporters.
All right, I see, I got it. Hang on. What page?
Page 112, Your Honor. And Judge, for the
Okay,
record,
okay.
lines 8 through 24.
All right.
Now, Officer Holmes, do you recall me asking you that as far as you were aware, it was only the red Durango? And your answer was that's all that was put out at that point? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do you also recall me saying, and it's safe to say in the 5 to 7, I'm talking about your responding time, and you interrupt and say, actually, I think at that point he hadn't put a bolo out yet. I believe all we knew about was the red Durango.
Yes, sir.
I said, okay. And I said, you answer, I think I put in that report too, but I arrived prior to the bolo being issued. You recall that answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, today, you're saying you reviewed other reports after your deposition that puts you on scene after the bolo?
It puts us on scene at the same time the Bolo is being delivered. Because it's not good tactics to arrive, to pull up next to a suspect vehicle who just was possibly involved in a shooting. I would never do that.
I apologize, go on.
I said I would never do that.
But didn't you answer under oath in your depo? I think I put that in the report too.
Sustained.
So today you're saying it was at the same time?
Yes, sir, I believe it was the same time.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. In those 5 minutes that it took you to get there, you obviously have no idea what happened prior to you getting there, correct?
Just what I heard on the radio.
Right. And you couldn't know what was going on because you weren't physically present, correct?
Correct.
All right. And at that point, you couldn't know what was going on because you didn't have a bolo yet, right? That happened as you arrived on scene?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you get there, you indicate there's 2 men on the sidewalk. One is in front of the Durango on the sidewalk, and one is way off to the left, if you're looking at it, correct?
Not way off. He's probably 5 or 6 feet to the left of it.
Well, did you not mark it on the photograph that we just had?
Yes.
Okay, did you not mark one way off on the side where the bushes are?
The photograph's small. It's kind of hard. The scale's not accurate, but yes, he was standing 5
Well-
or 6 feet away from the vehicle.
Are you saying the photograph's not accurate?
I'm saying the scale.
Well, a photograph is a true picture of the scene. Are you saying the photograph is not accurate?
Yes, photograph is accurate.
Okay. And parking spaces are about 10 feet apart, correct?
I don't know the width of the parking spaces.
Okay. Assuming that, and we'll just assume that as an estimate, if what you just drew showed about 2 or 3 spaces away, that's not 5 to 6 feet away, correct?
Okay.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you mark the X's on that screen?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And were the X's where you marked accurate and truthful?
Yes.
And did you have them about 3 spaces away?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicate today that when you looked in the vehicle, you see Mr. Davis stretched out across the back, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was he slumped over or was he stretched out?
Stretched out and slumped over. He was just leaning to the left.
Okay, well then how can he be stretched out? Was his feet up on the seat or was his feet on the ground?
No, his torso was stretched out.
Okay, but his body was not stretched across the back seat,
No,
correct?
his legs were still forward.
Okay, Judge, may I just approach this area, Your Honor?
Sure.
Thank you, Judge. The way you're sitting now, your feet are facing me.
Yes.
Your body's facing me.
Yes.
Can you please show the jury while sitting there, what do you mean by stretched out?
Just leaning all the way over to the left.
Okay, But his leg, just for the record, your legs are still facing me forward, correct?
My legs are, yes.
And was Mr. Davis's legs still forward?
As far as I can recall, yes, sir.
Okay. So his whole body was not stretched out, just the top half was leaning over to his left, slumped over, correct?
Yes.
Now, you actually interviewed some witnesses on scene, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You actually took notes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was after you had pulled Mr. Davis out of the vehicle?
Yes,
Did you pull Mr. Davis out of the vehicle, or did that civilian pull him out?
I did.
Okay, let me ask you this. Why did you not give CPR?
The civilian said he was trained, and I haven't been trained in CPR in 7 years. Last training I had was the academy.
Okay, and how old are you, sir, if you don't mind me asking?
40.
40?
Yes, sir.
And you've been an officer back then for about 6 years?
Yes, sir.
4 years of Navy experience?
Yes.
And you have have you ever met this civilian?
No, I have not.
You ever seen him any time before in your life?
No.
And all he said to you is, I'm certified, I'll do it?
Yes.
And you allowed him?
Yes.
When that happened, how many other first responders were on scene?
I don't know how many other police officers were there.
Well, let me ask you this, we've got...
There was at least 3 or 4 others on scene.
Besides you?
Yes, sir.
You even have Reserve Officer Glover, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's a reserve officer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, he wasn't a sworn law enforcement officer, correct?
Nothing I know of, no.
And when we call that, it's actually a volunteer, a civilian volunteer.
Correct.
And he wants to go to the academy and become an officer, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true, he was the one that roped off the tape at the Gate gas station?
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't know.
Sustained.
Are you aware that Reserve Officer Glover taped off that side?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Do you know who did it all?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you know what time they did it?
No, sir, I don't.
And matter of fact, the tape wasn't even up until the ambulance came and took Mr. Jordan to the hospital, correct?
I don't recall what time the tape went up.
Is it possible that the tape didn't go up till after the ambulance left?
What's the objection?
Speculation.
Sustained.
If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you sought out these witnesses, you took notes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you take accurate notes?
Yes, sir.
And are you trained in the academy and through your experience to be truthful, accurate, complete in your notes?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury what you did with your notes?
The notebook itself, it's destroyed, it's gone.
Right. So you didn't preserve those and turn those over to the state to show exactly what you did and what you wrote down, correct?
No, sir.
Now, you talked to Mr. Smith, a Stephen Smith, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that Mr. Smith told you that the gentleman who fired the shots was wearing a black hat?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Now, you indicated you transported the 3 men in your car all together, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that they were quiet and in shock?
Yes.
Is that normal for an event around some type of shooting?
For a shooting, yes, sir.
And how many shootings have you responded to as an officer?
I don't know, probably 10 or 11 of actual injury shootings.
Yes, sir. Even without injuries, people can still panic and
Yes.
be in shock even without someone being hurt, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you say having a gun fired is a jarring experience for someone who's not trained or experienced?
Yes, sir, it is.
And you've got experience in the military and as an officer, and you even agree, and that's a fair representation, people could still be in shock when a gun goes off.
Yes, sir.
And you said none of them were crying or carrying on in the back of your car, correct? They
No,
were
sir.
just quiet and in shock?
Yes, sir.
And that's accurate?
Yes.
Now, when you took them to the homicide office, you brought them in, correct?
Yes.
You actually put them in individual rooms, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that those rooms have audio and video recording capabilities?
Yes, sir.
Did you turn them on?
No.
Were you asked to turn them on?
No.
Did the homicide detectives give you any instructions regarding those taped video rooms?
No, sir.
And again, your markings on the pictures today that we just saw were accurate based on your memory.
Yes, sir.
And your testimony was accurate based on your memory.
Yes, sir.
No further questions, Judge.
Mrs. Wolfson?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, once you got voice
Can you get
now.
to the microphone, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Or you can wear one of those body mics if you'd like.
I can stand back here, Your Honor.
Okay.
Officer Holmes, once you took the boys to the police memorial building, did you then turn them over to the homicide detectives?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have anything to do with what went on from there?
No, I just typed up a report.
Now, Officer Holmes, Mr. Strolla asked you about the tape at the scene and the police tape that went up. Did you have any involvement at all in setting up a perimeter?
No, ma'am.
And why? Why not?
I was inside dealing with the witnesses and Jordan.
So you would have already been inside the perimeter?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer Holmes, I know you mentioned on your direct that you secured 2 witnesses at the scene.
Correct.
Was one of those witnesses then Steve Smith?
Yes.
Now, did you ever learn the name of the civilian who helped you pull out Jordan Davis from the car?
No, ma'am, I did not.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, may he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Stroll?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, officer. You're free to go. Next witness.
William Spicer.
William Spicer, please. Mr. Spicer, if you'll come to the front for me, please. And straight up here, if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath to you, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
All right, sir, if you'll come right around here and have a seat for me, please. And if you scoot up a little bit and speak right into that microphone, speak loudly so everybody can hear you.
All right.
That's good, thank you. Ms. Corey, go right ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. State your name for the record, sir.
William Spicer,
Spell your last name.
S-P-I-C-E-R.
Do you work for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department?
I do.
And can we refer to that from here on as JFRD?
Yes.
Thank you. And what is your position with the JFRD?
I'm an engineer.
Okay. And are you also a paramedic?
I am.
And can you tell this jury about your experience to become both an engineer and a paramedic?
I used to have to go to EMT and paramedic school, and engineer is a driver, essentially.
And what does it mean to be a paramedic?
You're able to do advanced life support. You're able to give drugs, do more than a basic EMT can.
And do you assess a patient's condition when you arrive to see what treatment can be rendered?
Yes.
And is all of this done on an emergency basis?
Yes.
When did you join Jack's Fire and Rescue?
March 22nd, 2010.
And have you stayed abreast of current training techniques since that time?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you, sir, what is your current assignment with Jack's Fire and Rescue?
I'm an engineer on Engine 5.
What part of town?
That's in Riverside on Forest Street.
Are there times when you as an individual and your colleagues at JFRD are assigned to different stations just for one night?
Yes.
And does that happen frequently?
Yes.
And does it depend on the need of a particular station at the time
Yes.
that you're assigned? Then let me ask you, sir, what was your assignment on November 23rd of 2012?
I was working at Station 44 on an overtime shift.
Where was that located?
That's on Western Way off of Bay Meadows.
Bay Meadows Road in the south side?
Yes.
Had you worked at that station before?
No.
Now, on that night, were you part of a team that responded to the Gate gas station at the corner of Bay Meadows Road and Southside Boulevard?
Yes.
Let me ask you before we go on to that, sir, are notes made in the normal course of any run by JFRD? Do you all make notes when you go on a run?
Afterwards, during the run, no, we're focused on patient care.
All right, but at or near the time then, as soon as you're done with the patient, do you then document what you've done with that patient?
Yes.
And do you have computer records that are maintained by your department that document the times of a particular run for rescue?
Yes.
Okay. And are notes, those notes then put into a computerized record that's maintained by your department?
Yes.
And do you have a report pertaining to this case here with you today?
Yes.
I would ask you to have that ready to refer to if you need it to refresh your memory.
Okay.
Judge, if I could just state remind what is not to be from it, just to refresh the record.
Sure. If he needs to do it.
If you need to, just refresh your memory and then answer my question. Sir, were you one of several units to respond to the gate gas station at 8251 Southside Boulevard on that evening?
Yes.
And is that located in Jacksonville, Duval County, Florida?
Yes.
What time did the call come in to JFRD?
It was received at 7:43
PM.
PM.
What was the nature of the call dispatched to you?
GSW, gunshot wound.
Thank you. And does that make it a priority for JFRD to get to the scene as quickly as possible?
Yes.
How many units went from your location?
3, an engine, a fire engine, a ladder truck, and a rescue unit.
Now, why does anyone other than a rescue unit respond to gunshot wounds?
For assistance. There's lots of things going on.
And are all of the members of those units trained to perform certain types of life-saving measures?
Yes.
And what's your specific training when it comes to assessing a gunshot wound patient?
It depends on the needs of the patient.
So you can't determine that until you get there.
Right.
Do you take equipment with you to plan for any possible method of treatment to save that person's life?
Yes.
And was all that equipment taken with all of you that evening?
Yes.
When you pulled into the gate gas station, was the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office there? Did you notice any units there?
I don't recall if they got there before or after us.
Do you virtually jump out of your vehicle, carry your equipment, and get to the patient as soon as possible?
Yes.
How did you all know where the patient was in this particular instance?
We pulled up and it was obvious that where he was at.
Where was the patient?
He was laying on the ground.
Was he near anything? Do you recall a vehicle near him?
He was laying right where they had parked, it appeared. He was laying right on the ground, supine, face up.
Was there anyone near him when you approached?
I don't recall in that situation. We just go straight to him.
Tell the jurors, what's your focus when you get out there?
We go straight to him and whatever's going on outside of the patient, we don't pay much attention to.
Does that include not being able to take the time to worry about physical evidence?
Yes.
If you step on something, do you have the time to worry about it, or is the patient's life the most important thing going on?
The patient's the priority.
Okay. So did you assess this patient, and refer to your notes if you need to, when you first got to him?
Per my notes, we found him, he was pulseless. We started CPR.
Let me stop you right there. Tell the jurors what you mean by pulseless.
He didn't have a pulse,
Where
not
did you
breathing.
check for a pulse, if you recall?
I don't recall, but standard procedure would say we would check a carotid pulse and see if he was breathing.
All right. Did you detect any signs of a pulse at all?
No.
Throughout the time you dealt with this patient, from the time you touched him at the gate gas station to the time you delivered him to the hospital, did he ever regain a pulse?
No.
Okay. What else did you assess with this patient?
We would look for injuries. We found one gunshot wound to his right mid-axillary line, which is your right side,
May he
essentially.
stand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, would you please stand? And would you show the jurors where you found a wound? Is it where you're touching?
Right here on my right side.
Your right side. All right, sir. And did you do that by lifting his shirt?
I don't recall, but standard procedure says we cut their clothes off in that situation
All right.
and see what we can find.
Resume. Now let's talk just a moment about cutting clothes off. Again, we talked briefly about evidence that could be around a patient, but in cutting their clothes off, do you have the time to worry about where that gunshot wound entered the clothing before it entered the body?
No, we just get their clothes off.
You just get them off as quick as you can? Okay. So then, after you found that gunshot wound, what were you able to do to treat that specific wound?
We just applied direct pressure, trying to control the bleeding, along with giving CPR and other procedures we were doing.
Did you intubate this patient?
Yes.
Was he ever able to breathe on his own?
No.
Okay. Are you also trying to load him up to get him into the rescue unit at the same time you all are doing all these other life-saving measures?
Yes, we started CPR, put him on the stretcher, and then continued once we got in the truck.
All right. And once you get to a patient, do you ever stop touching or working on that patient to try to save his life?
No.
Were you able to save Jordan Davis's life?
No.
How long, well, let me ask you to look again at your report. What time did you all leave the Gate gas station with Jordan Davis?
We left at 1954,
Okay, so 7:54 p.m.?
7:54 p.m.
And where did you take him?
Shands.
Tell the jurors where Shands Hospital is.
Shands is off of 8th Street off 95. It took us, looks like 13 minutes to get there. It's a trauma center.
Okay. And is that protocol for Jack's Fire and Rescue to take gunshot wound patients to the downtown rather than to the closest hospital?
Right, it's a trauma center.
In that 13 minutes, did you and your colleagues continue to try to work on Jordan Davis to resuscitate him and save his life?
Yes.
Were you able to do that?
No.
Did you turn Jordan Davis himself and all of his clothing and belongings over to the Shands Hospital personnel when you arrived?
Yes.
Did you have any further involvement in this case?
No.
May I have a moment with co-counsel?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Strolla?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Spicer, how are you?
Good morning.
Now, did you say there's a difference between being a paramedic and an EMT?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the jury what the difference is?
Being a paramedic is just further training. Once you've completed EMT training, you're able to do more advanced life-saving procedures.
Okay, and you're an EMT, correct?
Yes.
And the person you were with driving the rig was also an EMT?
Let me stop you. EMT, and I'm also a paramedic. I hold both licenses.
Okay, so you
Yes.
even got extra training?
Right, I'm a paramedic, yes.
Okay, I apologize.
No problem at all.
I want to give you credit for your training.
All right.
Your partner, who was driving the rig, correct? Or
Yes.
you weren't driving, correct?
No,
Okay, and your partner is also a paramedic?
I'm not sure if he was an EMT or a paramedic. He was one of the two.
What do you mean he was one of the two?
You have to be an EMT to be employed by the fire department.
Right.
But you could possibly be a paramedic.
Okay, and have you worked with that gentleman before?
I don't recall.
Okay, and as you sit here today, you don't know if he's a paramedic versus an EMT?
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. Now, can you tell the jury a little bit, how long ago did you say you started your EMT training? Because EMT comes before paramedic, correct?
Right.
So tell the jury when you started your EMT training.
That was in May of 2005 when I went to school for EMT.
Okay, and how long did you go to school?
EMT school is approximately 3.5 months.
Okay, and in that 3.5 months, is it basically full-time, 40 hours a week?
No, I believe it was 3 days a week.
Okay, and did you have to take tests?
Yes.
Did you have to get training?
Yes.
Were you trained by other people qualified and experienced in that training?
Yes.
Okay, you weren't being trained by the Jacksonville Beach lifeguards, correct?
No.
Okay. Now, when you do your 3 months, you said 3 months of training for EMT?
Yes.
Did you graduate with a certificate?
Yes.
Did you do okay to get passed?
Yes.
Okay. How long then were you an EMT before you became a paramedic?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Talk to the jury, tell me if you could educate me, and I apologize. What do you have to do to go from an EMT to a paramedic?
You go to school, you spend time in the classroom or in hospitals along with doing ride-alongs and learning new procedures and more advanced procedures.
How long did that take to go from an EMT to a paramedic?
This school took me approximately a year.
A year?
Yes.
Did you do it full-time?
Yes.
So even full-time, it took you a year to get through all the training necessary to have that higher education of a paramedic?
Yes.
And you recall the call going out, or you were dispatched at 7:44 that evening? I know we used military terms before, but 7:44 p.m.?
Yes.
And it only took you a few minutes to get there. You arrived 4 minutes later, correct?
Yes.
And in your report that you referred to, Ms. Corey, you actually had contact with Mr. Davis 2 minutes after you got there?
I would have to reference my.
Go ahead and reference. Or 7:49, patient contact, is that correct? If you don't have page numbers on your report, so I apologize.
No, no problem.
It looks like page 3 at the top. If you want to look at page 3,
I do not.
do you have page 3, or would you like me to approach?
Approach me, please.
Judge, if I may, and for the record, I'm showing page 3 to the witness of the JRF report. Sir, do you recognize the report I'm showing you?
Yes.
Is that the report you've referred to with Ms. Corey?
Yes.
Okay, is that page 3?
Yes.
Is this your same report?
Yes.
Does that indicate times laid out pretty clearly?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like you arrived at 7:48, had patient contact at 7:49,
Yes.
and you departed at 7:54, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now again, when you came on scene, was there anything different with this gunshot scene as any other gunshot scenes you've ever gone to before?
Every scene is unique, but nothing struck me as abnormal.
Okay. And how many gunshot scenes have you gone to in your career as an EMT or paramedic?
I don't know.
Can you give me an estimate? 10, 50, 100, 500,
100.
100? And that's in your 7-year career?
Yes.
And did you perform your duties, just like you have in all those other 100 times as a paramedic, what you did that evening?
Yes.
You didn't stop and talk to police, anything like that?
No.
They didn't pull you aside to show you evidence, anything like that?
No.
Did you see anything that you believed to be evidence? Did you see, were you kicking shell casings out of the way, moving stuff out of the way, or was the patient there and you said people were just around him, correct?
Correct.
And matter of fact, you indicated, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't even recall who was standing around him, but people were standing around him.
Correct. There was people in the vicinity.
That's what I'm asking you. And
Right.
obviously, you don't know who they were. Right? Was anybody on top of Mr. Davis or working on Mr. Davis?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, you said something with Ms. Corey that you checked for a pulse through the carotid pulse.
That's what we typically do. I don't specifically recall doing that, but that's how I checked if they have pulseless.
Okay, let me ask you this. Can you show the jury how you would check for that? And you could show it on yourself if you don't mind.
Stick 2 fingers right where your artery is and see if you can feel a pulse.
Now, let me ask you this. Did you receive specialized training to find someone's carotid artery to check a pulse?
Yes.
Did you get that training as an EMT?
Yes.
Did you get enhanced training as a paramedic?
Yes.
Were you actually taught by you said you went to hospitals in your training, correct?
Yes.
You were actually trained by medical doctors how to do that and find the pulse to even further your skill on that, correct?
The doctors did give us further training, yes.
Okay. Now, Ms. Corey also said that, I think she said, did you incubate Mr. Davis?
Intubate, yes.
Why do you do that?
It secures an airway. It's a tube that's able to go directly into the trachea, so you have a direct line to their lungs.
And then that's in case for life-saving measures, as you're giving chest compressions, you can get air going through the lungs so that the brain doesn't die, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further, Judge.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. He may be excused?
Absolutely.
Mr. Stroller?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. You're excused. Next witness.
Your Honor, statement called Sergeant Shore.
Sergeant Shore. Good morning, Sergeant. If you'll come right up to the front for us, please. And right up here, and if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right, Sergeant, if you'll come over here and have a seat for us in the witness chair. And you can adjust that microphone and just speak directly into it so we can hear you. Ms. Wilson, go right ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Sergeant. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Sergeant Brian J. Shore, spelled S-H-O-R-E, just like the beach, ID 5869.
Sergeant Shore, where do you currently work?
I work on the south side of Jacksonville in Zone 3.
Are you with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, ma'am.
And Sergeant, how long have you been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Coming up on 18 years in March,
How long have you been a sergeant within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
since 2009.
And then how long, Sergeant, have you been assigned to Zone 3?
To Zone 3 since 2000.
Could you explain to the jury what your duties entail being a sergeant within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Okay, I'm a patrol supervisor on the midnight shift. I've got a squad of officers working for me, so I supervise their activities, review their reports, and when they respond to serious incidents, then I respond out there and coordinate actions at the scene.
Sergeant, could you briefly explain to the jury what sort of training or coursework you had to complete prior to becoming a sergeant?
Training in ICS, which is Incident Command, follow-on training with the Sheriff's Office. I've done training in narcotics investigations, at scene and advanced traffic crash investigation, interviews and interrogations, injury and death investigations.
Okay. Now, Sergeant Shore, I'd like to turn your attention to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working on duty that night as a patrol sergeant in Zone 3?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Now, are you the only sergeant then assigned to that zone during your shift?
For the midnight shift, there's actually two sergeants because we don't have as much overlap. We've got a period where it's just the midnight shift working. We've actually got two squads, so we've got two sergeants, two squads working under a lieutenant.
Okay. And who was the other sergeant then working with you that night?
Sergeant Phil Christie.
And Sergeant, could you tell the jury what exactly the midnight shift is, what those hours are?
We work 6:30 at night until 5:55 in the morning.
Now, during your shift, Sergeant, did you respond to a call regarding a shooting at the Gate gas station at the intersection of Southside Boulevard and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What time did you receive this call?
I believe it was 7:40 p.m.
And did it come in over the radio then?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember where you were when you heard that call?
I was actually at the Shell station at Bay Meadows and 95 with Sergeant Christie getting coffee.
Okay. Now, once you heard that call come in over the radio, did both you and Sergeant Christie then respond to the scene?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Did you all respond in your marked patrol cars?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you driving separate cars that night?
Yes, ma'am, we were.
And Sergeant, when you responded to the scene, did you respond with lights and sirens on?
Yes, ma'am.
What time, Sergeant Shore, did you arrive on scene?
It was probably no more than 2 or 3 minutes, but I know it was definitely less than 5 minutes because a very short distance down the road.
And Sergeant Shore, I'm showing you States Exhibit 2. It should be up on the monitor in front of you. And is States Exhibit 2 then an aerial of the Gate gas station that you responded to?
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant Shore, can you explain to the jury what entrance you used to get into the gas station?
Sergeant Christie and I were both coming eastbound on Bay Meadows Road. When we reached Southside, we turned north on Southside, and we'd have actually gone into the entrance, which is to the left side of the screen here, that goes towards the strip mall with the Gate station just to the right of it.
And Sergeant Shore, you can actually draw on the screen if you wanted to give a direction to help the jury out.
This entrance right here.
Okay. Now, Sergeant Shore, I'm showing you States Exhibit 1, which is just kind of a different angle of that same entrance that you pulled into.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you park your patrol car once you arrived on scene?
Once I arrived on scene, my patrol car was parked right in this area right here.
And then where was Sergeant Christie's patrol car parked?
His patrol car was just to the right of mine.
Okay. When you arrived on scene, were other law enforcement officers already there?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how many law enforcement officers were there?
At that point, best of my knowledge, about 4 or 5.
Now, do you remember whether or not Jacksonville Fire and Rescue had arrived on scene?
They had not at that time.
Did they arrive then shortly thereafter?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Sergeant Shore, once you arrived on scene, what did you do?
Upon arriving on scene, Sergeant Christie and I both started coordinating actions there to secure the scene, find out what we had as far as any suspects that were outstanding, and also see who needed assistance at the scene as far as any medical attention.
Sergeant, could you explain to the jury how one goes about securing the scene?
Once we identify what the scene is, then we'll go ahead and, first of all, remove anybody that's not important to that scene and put them in a secure area. If they're witnesses, we try to keep them at the scene. And anybody that doesn't have any information that is going to be useful or doesn't need to be interviewed by the detectives, we release them. Put up crime scene tape to restrict access to the scene, and we post officers around the perimeter to make sure that access in and out is controlled.
Now, Sergeant, why is it important to secure a crime scene?
To protect any evidence at the scene. And
Where exactly did you all begin securing the crime scene in terms of establishing the perimeter?
Okay, we had the entrances blocked, so all the access all around the gate station was completely restricted with patrol vehicles blocking access. And initially, we put the crime scene tape up in this area here, where we had evidence that was obviously at the scene. And then it was later expanded all the way out into this area.
And so just for the record, just to be clear, the line on the right side that you drew, that one farthest to the right in the photograph, is that where the initial perimeter was established?
Yes, ma'am, in the area at the front of the store and extending out to the side here where this car is.
Would then the gas pumps in the parking lot just in front of the gas station have been included in that initial perimeter?
Yes, ma'am, it was that they extended the tape across there because it was a good location for us to secure everything.
Okay. And then when was it that the perimeter was actually expanded?
Once rescue had come and they'd taken away the one injured individual for treatment, then we assessed what we had and expanded it out to make sure we had complete control of the area.
Now, when you say you shut off the entrances to the gas station, which entrances were those?
We had this entrance here blocked. We actually blocked across this entrance to restrict vehicle access. Had a vehicle here to keep vehicles from going back behind the gas station. There's another entrance over here on Bay Meadows Road on the side, and there was a police car that was there blocking that too.
And when you say you're securing the scene, does that mean then that you have officers physically putting up the police tape?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, once a crime scene is secure, who was allowed in and out of that crime scene?
At that point, the scene was secured, and there was just the supervisors and the detectives and the evidence technician.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Stroh, cross?
Just 1 second of that.
Sure.
Turn my mic on, I apologize.
Sergeant Stroh, looking at your teleprompter there. Can you tell me who put the crime scene tape up on that first perimeter, that first long red line you have? You said that's where it started?
I couldn't give you an exact name. I know we had several officers that were working with the crime scene tape.
And when did they put that tape up?
Like I said, once fire rescue had departed,
And do you know what time they departed?
I couldn't give you the exact time. They weren't there for very long.
Okay, and then you extended it to that second line, it's a smaller vertical line, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then at one point, you have a red line over a picture of a car on States 1 right now.
Yes.
Okay, I'm assuming that car wasn't there. Was a police car there, or did you have it taped off?
That was the area right here. That was taped off. There wasn't a police car there.
Okay, and now you have kind of a dotted line going back. Was that taped off all the way to the back, to that, where that alley goes through, that car?
Yes, sir. There was tape running all down that side.
Okay, and you said that car alley was now blocked by a police car.
Yes, sir, it was.
When did that car get there?
Probably within about 15 minutes of my responding to the scene.
All right, so 15 minutes after you got there.
Yes, sir.
And tell the jury when you got there.
I got there, I got the initial call at 7:40 p.m., so by 7:45 at the latest, I was at the scene.
So within 20 minutes, there was now a car blocking that. And that back alley, if you could tell the jury, that actually connects from the plaza behind the gate to get out onto Bay Meadows, correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. Now, at one point, you said you blocked off the entrance where these two large trees are coming off of South Side, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we'll call that the first entrance into the plaza. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
That accurate?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury how many entrances are in that plaza to get there?
To get into the plaza besides this entrance here,
Yes, sir.
we're talking about the strip mall section.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's an entrance right here that you can see, and it's going to be right in here. And if you go further down to the left, there's an entrance that goes from this plaza to an office complex next door. And then from that office complex, there's an exit that goes back out onto Southside Boulevard.
Right. And matter of fact, that one north of where you just did the little scribble on the the path right there, and I know it's
Yes, sir.
hard. That one just north of it was not blocked off, correct?
That's correct.
And people had full access, unfettered, unrestricted access to get into that plaza, correct?
Yes, sir.
There were actually cars and people still in that plaza because businesses were open, fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, restaurants, things like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, matter of fact, I think there's a bread company, there's pizza, there's a sandwich shop, there's something called the Loop.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so open businesses stretch all the way down that plaza.
Yes, sir.
And JSO never restricted access to that plaza, correct?
Not to the shopping center.
Okay, was there any crime scene put up anywhere in that plaza other than your red markings that the jury sees right now?
No, sir. Everything was concentrated in the area around the gate station.
Absolutely, and I understand that. Now, can you tell this jury how many people came in and out of that plaza while you were on scene?
I couldn't say.
Can you tell the jury how many people came into that plaza before you arrived on scene?
I couldn't say.
Okay, and when did you leave the scene, if you know?
Probably sometime around midnight.
Okay, and after midnight, were people still coming and going in that plaza if there were cars there?
The plaza had pretty much shut, everything in there had shut down, but yeah, they could still come and go.
And again, from the time you got there to the time you left, and assuming again the businesses were open, people were coming and going. Is that fair and accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a sergeant on scene, you pretty much control what the officers do to make sure everybody does their job, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's until a lieutenant gets there or homicide?
Yes, sir.
And Lieutenant Callahan was there?
Yes, sir.
And once Lieutenant Callahan arrived, that officer basically trumps what you want to do?
That's correct.
Okay. How long were you there when Lieutenant Callahan got there?
Probably about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay. And after that 20 to 30 minutes, when Lieutenant Callahan got there, what other role or function did you serve at that point?
I let her know what the situation was. I'd gotten information from the hospital on the victim status, and I'd made the call through investigative to contact homicide.
Okay. And then at that point, were you done with your duties other than just observing, watching your officers?
No, sir.
What else did you do?
At that point, at one point, we had some tag information, so I followed up on some of that.
And can you tell the jury, because you actually took information you found about the license plate, correct?
One of the officers gave me information with the tag.
Okay, and that officer brought it to you because you were the sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long were you on scene when that transpired?
Probably 15, 20 minutes.
All right, so within 20 minutes of you being on scene, you guys had information about Michael Dunn, is that correct?
We had information that who the vehicle was registered to and knew what type of vehicle it was.
And you guys ran that on David, it's a computer program you guys use to get information?
Ran it through several different checks.
Okay, and that gives you the make and model of the car?
It gives you the make, and it tells you the body style on it, whether it's a 2-door or 4-door.
Okay, it verified the license plate number?
Yes, sir.
And it matched?
Yes, sir.
The license plate number matched the description of the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Matched the description you pulled on your computer?
Yes, sir.
You then put that out as, again, we've heard of what a bolo was. You then, 20 minutes later, put that information out there, correct?
Yes, it was broadcast out to all the officers.
Okay, and did you instruct the officers in the area to start checking the area to look for that car that matched the description you just had?
Yes, sir, I did.
And matter of fact, you guys were very specific where there was a 5 to 10 mile radius from the gate gas station where officers were sent to look, correct?
That's where they started spreading out from.
All right.
From the gate gas station working outwards.
5 to 10 miles, is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, that was a radius. We're not talking about a diameter. Do we understand the difference?
Yes, sir.
A radius is from, if I'm standing at the gate gas station, it's 5 to 10 miles every direction.
In each direction.
Did your officers do that?
The best of my knowledge, they did.
Okay, and again, as a sergeant, you put that order out, correct?
Yes, sir.
And officers are expected to follow your orders, correct?
Yes, sir, they are.
Did you get any information that night that an officer did not follow your orders?
No, sir.
Do you have any reason to believe that your officers did not search thoroughly 5 to 10 miles radius from that gas station?
No, sir.
And they did that for several hours, isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
And nothing came back, no officer ever responded to you that they found a vehicle, correct?
No, sir.
And in fact, isn't it true that they were specifically ordered to check the hotels in the area?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever learned where Mr. Dunn's hotel was?
No, sir.
No officer, no homicide ever talked to you or briefed you about this?
No, sir.
After that night, were you ever called in again to help the homicide officers with this investigation?
No, sir, I wasn't.
Other than the report you filled out and what you've testified today, have you been asked to do anything else in this case?
And nothing as far as any investigation or follow-up.
Nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Ms. Wolfson?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant, once homicide becomes involved in a case, do they then complete the investigation and all the follow-up work?
Yes, sir. I already met, yes, ma'am, sorry.
No other questions, Your Honor.
May he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Strolla?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. You're excused. State's next witness.
Officer Forrester?
Forrester?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Sergeant. Where's JSO? Give me JSO.
Officer, if you'll come forward to the front here and raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath to you.
Did I just lose my red pen?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, officer. If you'll come right around here and have a seat for us, please. Ms. Wolfson, go right ahead.
Good morning, officer. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Michael C. Forster. Last name is spelled Forster.
No, Officer Forrester, where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office as a bailiff in the courthouse.
How long have you been employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
29 and a half years,
And officer, how long have you been a bailiff then at the courthouse?
approximately a month.
Prior to becoming a bailiff, what was your job with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
I was a police officer for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Were you a patrol officer?
Yes,
Officer, how long have you been a patrol officer?
29 and a half years.
Now, when you were working as a patrol officer, were you assigned to a particular zone?
Yes, I was working in the south side area, which is Zone 3.
And Officer Forrester, were you working in Zone 3 then back on November 23rd of 2012?
Yes, I was.
What shift were you working back then?
I was working Watch 6.
And Officer, what is Watch 6?
That is the evening shift and midnight shift that starts at 6:30 and it ends at 5:55 in the morning.
Officer Forrester, during your shifts, did you respond to a call about a shooting at the gate gas station at the corner of Southside Boulevard and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, I did.
Where were you when you first heard the call?
That I don't recall.
Okay. And officer, once you heard the call come out though, did you respond directly to the scene?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember what time it was that you responded to the scene?
I believe it was 7:42 p.m.
Officer Forrester, when you responded to the scene, did you respond in a marked patrol car?
Yes.
And were your lights and sirens on?
Yes, they were.
Now, I'm showing you, Officer Forrester, on the screen in front of you, State's Exhibit 2. Is that on the screen to your left?
Yes, I see it.
Okay. Can you show on State's Exhibit 2 where you parked your patrol car once you arrived on scene? You could just put like an X where you parked your car.
Okay, I parked in the southeast entrance and exit of the business.
If you put your finger on there
Oh.
with some pressure, you can put an X or a mark
Okay.
and just drag your finger a bit and it'll make a larger mark. It should. There you go.
Okay, so that's where then you parked your car?
That's correct.
And Officer Forrester, once you parked there, and is that the entrance then onto Bay Meadows Road?
That's correct, yes.
Once you parked your car there, did you then house an establishment perimeter of the scene?
Yes, I did.
And did that include putting a police tape at that particular entrance?
That's correct, yes.
Did you then control who came in and out of the crime scene at that particular entrance?
Yes, that's correct.
And just another angle, Officer, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 6. And I know in this right?
That's correct.
Was that vehicle then within inside that perimeter that you stopped?
Yes, that would have been inside of the perimeter.
Did you have any other involvement in this case other than blocking that perimeter and holding that perimeter?
I put some crime scene tape up also.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Strolla, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, please. Gotta make sure I'm right side up. Morning, Officer Forster, how are you?
Good morning, sir.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's well-deserved.
Yes,
Now, you actually were en route at 7:42, correct?
that's correct.
All right, and you don't recall where you were, but that is your zone.
That is my zone, correct.
And in your report, it looks like you arrived at about 7:47, about 5 minutes later?
That's correct, yeah.
Now, and every patrol car might be different, but JSO actually has laptop computers inside, correct?
That's correct.
And that goes back to dispatch who does these reports?
Yes,
And matter of fact, you don't have to do the old way of calling on the radio, talking to dispatch, and interrupting any type of radio silence. You guys can actually hit a button on the computer when you've arrived, correct?
that's correct, yeah.
So you could actually be coming onto the scene, not physically parked, but hit a button on that laptop and it says you've arrived, correct?
Yes,
And that's common practice. You don't have to be physically stopped before you hit that button, correct?
that's correct.
And that's standard procedure in your almost 30 years as a Jacksonville Sheriff's Officer?
Yes, but on priority one calls, if it's emergency, we also, when we arrive, we put it on the air if possible.
And that's okay, but I'm just want to make sure though. that
Yes.
You can do both. You can hit a button as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And again, that's standard procedure with JSO.
Yes,
Now, when you get there, you didn't immediately put up crime scene tape, correct?
no,
Matter of fact, you had to get there and talk to, I believe, a sergeant, is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
And the sergeant asked you to put up crime scene tape.
That's correct.
Okay, where did that sergeant instruct you to put the tape up?
Close to where I parked.
Okay, and that was so you could block the entrance of Bay Meadows so cars couldn't come in and out?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell the jury how many vehicles left in the 5 minutes before you got there out of that Bay Meadows exit?
No, that I can't recall.
Okay. And were people actually there on foot walking?
And the outside of the perimeter?
Even on inside, were people at that gate, gas station, or plaza on foot without a vehicle?
Yes,
Did people walk off or try to walk off the perimeter without their vehicle?
not where I could see, no.
All right. So you just don't have knowledge of it?
That's correct.
Okay. And how long were you on scene before you were told to go put up the crime scene tape?
That I don't recall either.
Okay. So it could have been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you just don't know?
I don't know.
Okay. And you didn't put that in your report?
That's correct, I didn't put my report.
All right. And clearly your report was done much closer in the time of 2012 than today?
Yes,
And you would agree that your memory was more fresh back then than it would be today?
that's correct.
And in fact, you noted in your report that a reserve officer put crime scene tape up on the north end of the gate entrance. Is that correct?
That's correct,
And how did you know that?
because I had a reserve officer standing, another one standing at close proximity where I was at.
Okay. And a reserve officer is somebody who is a civilian volunteer, correct?
Yes, but they wear uniforms too.
Oh, no, absolutely. But
Yes.
they're not sworn law enforcement. They didn't go through the police academy and get hired.
That's correct.
All right. They're not in, I call it an FTO or a field training officer. You familiar with that?
Yes,
So it's not like they're with a field training officer for purposes of being a law enforcement officer. They're just there to get experience.
no, they also go for a shorter academy, not as long as ours, and they have to have a field training officer prior to being, prior to their training being complete.
No, right, and they have to, I mean, they're with a field training officer, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, it's all outside the scope of the direction.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this. In your knowledge, the only tape on the north side, and you put in your report, was the gate gas station entrance. Is that correct?
Yes,
And would you agree, is it fair to say that the gate gas station is separated from the plaza?
yes,
There's actually a road that goes behind the plaza and behind the gate that separates it. So you can go from south side to Bay Meadows, correct?
that's correct, yeah.
And then in behind that, there's some businesses off on the back of the plaza. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you're familiar with that because you've worked that zone?
That's correct.
And there are dumpsters and garbage cans and things like that for these businesses?
That I don't recall if there are any dumpsters or not.
Okay, but it's fair to say there's restaurants and other businesses there,
Yes,
and you just can't recall if there's any dumpsters back there?
that's correct.
Did you do any type of search of that area?
No, I did not.
Were you ordered to do any search of that area?
No, I was not.
Did you ever hear any orders go out from any sergeants to search that area?
No,
You were just there basically for traffic control, so people couldn't come in from Bay Meadows, is that correct?
that's correct, yeah.
Thank you so much. Nothing further, Judge.
Ms. Wolfson?
No further questions, Your Honor.
May he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Stroller?
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
May he be excused?
Oh, yes, I apologize, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, you're excused.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Kevin Thompson. Kevin Thompson.
Actually, hang on one second. Mr. Guy and Mr. Stroller, let me see y'all for a real quick minute.
Yes, sir.
Next witness will take a little longer than these witnesses have to this point. So we'll take our break. Again, obviously, don't talk about the case among yourselves. Don't let anybody talk about it in your presence. We will break until 5 minutes of 11. I'll give you 20 minutes, okay? So we'll see you back in 20 minutes. Court's in recess.